The Battle of Teutoburg Forest is one of the grimmest days in Roman military history, which has captivated historians and the general public for centuries. Naturally, much attention has been placed on analyzing the lead-up to battle, the ambush, and the ensuing ripple effects across the empire. In these narratives, the subject of the battlefield itself is only useful up until the Roman army is defeated, at which point it becomes discarded in favor of other, more relevant topics. Rarely do we hear about what happened in the dark forest after the fighting ended, or the Roman army's return to these haunted lands. Today, let us explore this fascinating historical blind spot. A big thanks to the Great Courses Plus for sponsoring this video. They offer subscription-based on-demand lecture videos, put together by top professors from renowned universities and specialists from places like National Geographic and the Smithsonian. You get unlimited access to a huge library of over 11,000 videos, which cover topics from history to science, math, and literature, with new content being added every month. Their history playlist is honestly amazing, and they have an incredibly detailed 24-part series on the Roman Empire. To enrich our own recent content, definitely check out Lecture 2 on the career of Augustus, and Lecture 3 on his successor Tiberius. For me, I found it best to download the app on my phone. This allows me to swap from video to audio mode so I can listen to the series as a podcast while going about my daily activities. Right now, the Great Courses Plus is offering a free trial, which you can start by clicking the link in the description below or visiting thegreatcoursesplus.com/invicta. I highly recommend that you take a look at what they have to offer and dive into the material that you are most interested in. As the story goes, 3 Roman legions and their auxiliaries entered the forests of Germania in 9 AD and met their doom at the hands of the traitor Arminius and his cleverly laid trap. The fighting occurred in stages over several days, as the Roman column was slowly gnawed upon and eventually swallowed whole. Seeing this inevitable doom upon them, the imperial officer corps and General Varus himself committed suicide. After the Roman army had completed its convulsive death throes, the entire forest must have come to an ominous still. It's hard to imagine just what that transition must have felt like, as the violent yells of some 20,000 dead or captured gave way to the chirping of birds. What happened next is not clear, as we have no direct sources on the matter from the victor's perspective. However, we can start to get an idea from a few key Roman writers like Tacitus, combined with our understanding of warfare from the period, as well as the findings of modern archaeology. The first people to set foot on the battlefield once fighting had ended would have been the victorious German tribes. Several immediate goals were in order: hunting down survivors, tending to the dead, and taking prizes. The first order of business would already have begun over the course of the battle and extended several days after. The author Paterculus, for instance, mentions an instance of Roman horsemen abandoning the main body of infantry during the assault and fleeing for the Rhine, only to be slain along the way. Elsewhere, it seems that groups of soldiers or individuals melted away into the surrounding woods and marshes seeking refuge. The Germans, however, knew that this was their chance to inflict as much damage as possible to the enemy, and would not have allowed their quarry to slip so easily through their net. After all, they were the masters of this land, and would have held the advantage in such a deadly hunt. Archaeology of the area reveals incredible stories of the pursuit that occurred. For instance, near a portion of the Germanic wall, a bell was found still attached to the neck of a mule. It was stuffed full of grass, indicating that some panicked Roman soldiers had attempted to silence it in their desperation to avoid detection, while listening to the cries of their comrades being slaughtered around them. It's unlikely that their efforts were successful. Other stories are small and similarly terrifying. The small scatterings of coins that tell of an officer's purse that spilled across the muddy ground, the small caches where soldiers dug holes for their money, the clasps from armor that were torn off of the bodies, the surgeon's tools all lying together as the medics themselves were killed or taken captive. We do know, though, that some Roman soldiers did manage to make it out of this living hellscape alive and fall back to their own lines, regrouping at the last standing fortress of Aliso. However, the percentage of those who achieved such an escape was quite low. Meanwhile, the Germans would have begun their second initiative, tending to the dead. The tribesmen were sure to comb over the battlefield, recovering as many of their own as possible. Any wounded allies would be quickly brought to their own healers, while any Roman survivors were generally dispatched with a spear thrust to the neck. Those Germans who could not be saved or who had already perished would have been brought back to their own villages where funeral arrangements could be made. Such ceremonies varied from locale to locale, but typically involved the dead being placed on a pyre, a speech being delivered by the head of the community, and the body being burned by the deceased individual's surviving family. The warrior's weaponry might accompany him in the fire, be placed alongside his ashes in a grave, or stay with the family, which kept his burnt remains in a treasured urn to be passed down through the generations. The Romans suffered a far less solemn and honorable fate. Like many other cultures around the world, the Germans took prisoners after a victory in battle. The lucky ones would be carted off to face a life of servitude. The unlucky ones would be sacrificed to the gods. It seems that this act could take many forms. Tacitus mentions how special altars had been prepared for prominent centurions and tribunes. Tradition dictated that such victims would be treated just like any other animal offering. As such, a priest would oversee the affair, chanting a prayer to the subject deity while preparing to wield the sacred knife. Roman sources claim that the actual killing would only come once the victim had assented to the rite. For livestock, this would be done by using a rope to induce a bow from the animal. It's easy to imagine the same being done to their Roman replacements. Once this step had been completed, the priest would slash the victim's neck, allowing the blood to spill over the altar, the priest, and the land itself. Other victims were ritualistically hung from oak trees. The practice involved teams of men raising the captive with a rope, slowly strangling the victim while a priest chanted his prayers. Yet more sacrificial practices called for decapitation, with the severed heads being nailed to the trees as a way to demarcate an entire area as a gruesome temple to victory. Finally, some Romans were simply just thrown into marshes, already considered to be sacred ground, as both an offering and a thanks to the gods in the dark recesses of the woods. But such special attention could not be paid to the tens of thousands of Roman vanquished. The rest would be afforded no honors or holy rites. They would be cleared from the road, which was still an important route for commerce and communication, and piled up haphazardly to rot in the open air. As the bodies were moved, the Germans would undertake their third immediate goal, the taking of prizes. There was much of material value to be looted. For instance, Governor Varus and his officers surely had riches aplenty stored away in their baggage train near the head of the army, while the troops stowed their own prized possessions in the baggage compartments taking up the rear. Among the carts strewn across the forest would also be valuables belonging to the camp followers who accompanied the army. Once all these trunks had been emptied, the dead themselves would be despoiled. Purses cut, jewelry snatched off, and rings pried from cold, bloated fingers. This would have been a gold rush for the victors, who could have gotten their hands on everything from rare minerals to cooking wares. But perhaps some of the most prized sources of loot would be the tens of thousands of sets of weapons and armor. After all, every Roman soldier was a professional, with their own set of high-end kit forged by skilled manufacturers and smiths. These had long been prized in Germany as valuable trade goods and for practical use in intertribal warfare. It seems that the battlefield was so thoroughly picked clean of these items that archaeological investigations of the site have failed to turn up weapons and armor in any large numbers. Instead, what we find are thousands of tiny nails from Roman sandals, which the barbarians showed no interest in collecting. One of the most iconic pieces that's been found on the site of Teutoburg, though, is an iron mask. It's thought to have been the property of one of the German auxiliaries who betrayed the Roman army. It was originally plated in silver, but the silver was stripped off for reuse. The mask itself, though, was left at the foot of the wall that had been built for this ambush, in a spot where the killing had been the highest. It was a symbol and an offering. The auxiliary who left it wanted to ensure that passerbyers knew who had done this, and wanted to offer it as a sacrifice, and wanted to indicate that he had cast aside all of his former ties to the Romans in favor of the Germans. Another important battlefield prize were the Roman army standards. Though not of much material value, they had tremendous symbolic value. This was especially true of the legionary eagles. 2 of these were apparently captured by the Germans immediately after the battle, while the third was only found later amid the marshes where a legionary soldier had hid it. The standards would be taken back to the tribal homelands as a symbol of great victory. But these weren't the only bits of memorabilia brought home. It seems that the Germans also collected bits of human bodies as trophies and talismans. While the mass graves from Teutoburg are inconclusive on their own, other burial sites across the region have missing bones, which are assumed to have been taken by the victors in other battles. The most prominent of these prizes, of course, was the head of Quintilius Varus. which was sent by Arminius to the Marcomanni tribe in hopes of bringing them to his side. However, their king wished to avoid the inevitable wrath of the legions, and promptly set it on to Rome as a gesture of goodwill. He knew that Roman vengeance would come soon after the shock, and that they would have no mercy for those who had committed such an act of aggression. Indeed, the Roman response came quickly. Once Augustus had shaken off the shock of the news, he immediately ordered his most capable general, Tiberius, to lead a campaign of retribution. He was an excellent choice of a commander who had just put down the massive Illyrian revolt and had extensive experience with both guerrilla combat and Germanic warfare. However, to the dismay of those who craved immediate vengeance, Tiberius exercised his disciplined approach to war by methodically securing the border and slowly pushing into Germany rather than blitzing into the fray. He succeeded in resecuring the frontier, but departed after 2 years with much left to be done. Tiberius would be replaced by one of his most talented young proteges, who would become known as Germanicus. As the agnomen implies, he would achieve great things in Germania with a series of campaigns that finally avenged the fallen of Teutoburg. We'll cover his campaigns in another video. But for now, I want to mention one of the most striking moments of this saga, which occurred when Germanicus led the Roman army back to the site of battle. Here is how Tacitus describes the event. Quote, "A passionate desire burned in the Caesar to pay the last tribute to the fallen and their leader, and the whole army present with him were stirred to pity at the thought of their kindred, of their friends, and of the chances of battle and of the fate of mankind. Sending Caecina forward to explore the secret forest passes, and to throw bridges and causeways over the flooded marshes and treacherous levels, they marched over the dismal tract, hideous to sight and memory." Varus's first camp, with its broad sweep and measured spaces for officers and eagles, advertised the labors of 3 legions. Then, a half-ruined wall and shallow ditch showed that there, the now broken remnant had taken cover. In the plain between were bleaching bones scattered or in little heaps as the men had fallen, fleeing or standing fast. Nearby lay splintered spears and the limbs of horses, while human skulls were nailed prominently to the tree trunks. In the neighboring groves stood the savage altars at which they had slaughtered the tribunes and chief centurions. Survivors of the disaster, who had escaped the battle or their chains, told how here the legates fell, there the eagles were taken, where the first wound was dealt upon Varus, and where he found death by suicidal stroke of his own unhappy hand. They spoke of the tribunal from which Arminius made his speech, all the gibbets and torture pits for the prisoners, and the arrogance with which he insulted the standards and the eagles. And so, 6 years after the fatal field, a Roman army, present on the ground, buried the bones of the 3 legions, and no man knew whether he consigned to the earth the remains of a stranger or a kinsman, but all thought of all as friends and members of one family, and, with anger rising against the enemy, mourned and hated. At the erection of the funeral mound, the Caesar laid the first sod, paying tribute to the departed and associating himself with the grief of those around him. But Tiberius disapproved, possibly because he considered the acts of Germanicus with a jealous suspicion, possibly because he thought that the sight of the unburied dead must have given the army less alacrity for battle and more respect for the enemy, while a commander invested with the augurate and administering the most venerable rites of the religion ought to have avoided all contact with the funerary ceremony. Tacitus's account is gripping in its detail and evocative passages. However, while we would do well to take his sensational tale with a grain of salt, it's unfortunately one of the only remaining sources we have to go on regarding this event. Luckily though, modern archaeologists have been able to at least confirm that the Romans did indeed return to the site with the discovery of 8 mass graves identified as containing the bones of military-aged men with signs of traumatic injuries. Even today, excavations continue to uncover more of this 2,000-year-old tragedy, and we will surely know more as the work progresses. We hope you've appreciated this deep dive into an undercovered aspect of history. Let me know if you'd like to learn more about the aftermath of other famous battles. A huge thanks to the patrons for funding the channel, and to the researchers, writers, and artists who made this video possible. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.